Hello, listeners. This is Janine
and Kristen
from Henrico CASA. You are listening to our podcast, Vigilant Voices. Living life every day. Hello, listeners, and Happy New Year.
Yeah, 2025 is going to be a good year for us, for you, for CASA, for children in our community.
Love it. Let's make that happen, Kristen.
Yes. And how do we know it'll be a great year? Because you, listener, are here with us to know more about the challenges facing children and families so that we can ensure no child faces continued abuse or neglect this year.
Right. We are not just wishing for a good year. Mm-hmm. We really are committed to taking action every day to make sure it is a better year than last year for children who are experiencing or have experienced trauma.
Yeah, I love that distinction of wishing for something versus just going after it, because our topic of conversation for today is the science of hope. Mm-hmm. And by definition, hope is more than just like mere optimism.
Right. My understanding is that optimism is just that belief or an overall like outlook on life.
Sure,
right? Just
sure.
Positive, optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
Hope, though, is this expectation or desire of things to come. Is that
yeah,
fair?
that's exactly kind of how I see it too. And I saw a quote in this publication from Arizona State University that really helped me kind of identify the difference.
Yeah.
And so the quote read, "Hopeful people cannot just wish things into existence. Mm-hmm. Hope requires a person to take responsibility for their wants and desires and take action in working towards them. Mm-hmm. Optimistic people see the glass as half full, but hopeful people ask how they can fill up that glass."
I like that. And I think that's really true when you sort of think about the slight distinctions.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about hope at CASA because having hope can really change a child's outlook on life.
For sure, which makes me think of the case story I wanted to share today about a teen who we will call Taylor.
Okay.
Taylor found herself in court due to truancy. She had missed something like 36 days of school, and when she did come to school, she was tardy. And so her teachers were noting that when she did come, she wore dirty clothes, and she seemed tired or maybe depressed. She wasn't getting schoolwork done. All those things.
Right.
They actually had a shower at the school, and they were kind of sneaking her in there to let her use it. Like they were trying to help her.
Yeah.
And while trying to directly help Taylor while she was at school, they were also trying to call her dad to find out how they could help. But he never answered their calls or emails.
And this is probably then the reason why this case came to the attention of the court.
Right.
And it was on what we call in our world a CHINS motion, so a child that is in need of services, because the educators and other adults surrounding Taylor were worried that she might not have the supervision in this case,
Right.
That she really needed to be safe and cared for at home.
Yeah, and those educators were right. She wasn't being cared for because she lived in a single-parent home. And that one parent, her father, was just consumed with working multiple jobs to make ends meet. And in the beginning, I'll say her father wasn't all that happy to see Taylor's CASA advocate get involved.
Right.
I'm sure it felt, maybe overwhelming or maybe a bit threatening to him. But over time, he became more agreeable to this advocate visiting Taylor,
which is great. And I think we'll probably learn more about Taylor later in the podcast, but. If she starts to gain a sense of hope for her future, and hopefully some of that is through her interactions with her CASA advocate, I really don't doubt that things are going to really start looking up for her.
Right. And that's true for so many of the children we serve. Studies have actually been done on this, kind of the science of hope.
Right.
And vulnerable children who have a CASA advocate report significantly higher levels of hope than other children in similar situations.
Which is great, because hope generates so many other positive outcomes.
Right.
And so that Arizona State article you referenced, which I assume we'll go ahead and
Sure.
link in the notes, I mean, it really clearly reports that students with hope do better in school. They have stronger social, emotional skills, and ultimately they're able to build deeper connections and relationships.
Yeah, which are all great things.
Important.
Yeah, for sure. And another article I found on the National Institute of Health site, which again is linked in our show notes, it shows the connection between hope and so many other positive things like building resilience or learning to cope with emotions. your quality of life, and having a sense of purpose.
Yeah, this is really great information. And I guess we just see the value of having hope, right?
Right. But what are we going to do with that information?
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So what we want to do is see how we can give hope to children.
Yes.
Because we really do want them to experience all of those positives that we just listed and chatted about briefly above.
Yeah, we do. So let's start talking through a list of ways to teach kids about hope. Because remember, it's not just about feeling optimistic. It's about taking action towards whatever positive vision, you or the child wants to claim.
Right. So I guess if we start, I think first and foremost, I would say, and we've talked about this a lot, listen to them, right? Active listening, right?
Yeah.
And encourage their dreams or be supportive. What are their interests? What are their goals? Can you build them up? Maybe share with them and show them or walk them through steps that they might be able to take to reach those goals.
Yeah.
Reality is that those dreams might be super big or super far off and maybe not even realistic. But I think there's always ways to create smaller mini milestones along a path to achieving a bigger dream or goal.
Yeah, breaking goals down into smaller steps and achievements is a great idea. Because then you can recognize and celebrate those little accomplishments, no matter how small. That builds their confidence. It reinforces positive feelings, just all along the journey towards whatever that bigger long-term hope or dream is.
Exactly. I think we could think about it like building up these wins is like filling a bank with, let's just say, deposits of positive experiences. So when a setback or a negative experience comes.
Yeah, or like a withdrawal, if we want to go along with your bank analogy.
Yes. Those withdrawals don't then bankrupt you.
Yes.
Right? So there's still then a lot of positives to cling to. I think it gives children an ability to better withstand, than the tough moments that are inevitable and will come in life.
Right. The losses, failures, setbacks, we know they'll come, right? And we'll learn from them. But a child's ability to not be swayed by those negative experiences is somewhat tied to their sense of accomplishment from the past, but also their sense of hope for the future.
And, even in those down moments, there's still ways to point out opportunities for growth or maybe even silver linings.
Yeah, true.
I think we should always try to remember that everything can be a learning experience.
Yeah.
And that includes the tough moments. And so using those tough moments to teach children how they can focus on the bright side.
And how to maintain hope, right,
Yes.
in the face of those challenges.
Yes, right. And I think the best way to teach that is to really project it yourself.
Yeah.
If you remain hopeful, then as we've also talked about, children notice these things. They pick up on these things. And so maybe they can cling to that hopeful mindset as well.
Yeah. And something I think I want to point out is that children who have experienced abuse, neglect, or trauma of some kind, they sometimes have a difficult time with the idea of dreams or having hope for the future. They've been so consumed with surviving the present, like there isn't space for a bigger thought of any kind.
Sad, but definitely the reality.
It is. And, even like knowing what you like and being able to formulate a hope or dream from your interest, it's difficult. I saw that a lot. And I actually still see it with one of my children. They just don't really understand that. They don't really understand their emotions well enough to like identify what they like or don't like.
Yeah. And for those of us with healthy childhoods, I think it can be really hard to imagine.
Yeah.
But I think you're also right. And so at CASA, we tend to ask children questions to really build relationships. And, go-tos can be really simple. I mean, they could be as simple as, what is your favorite color?
Yeah.
What are you enjoying learning at school? I mean, things like that. But unfortunately, children with complex trauma really might not even be able to answer those because they just don't feel like they
just don't know.
They just don't know.
Yeah,
that's a good way to
it's
put
so
it.
hard to imagine and hard to explain if you haven't like seen it or experienced it in a child. But it's real. And so for children like these, before you can tap into their own hopes and dreams, you might need to start smaller by even just exposing them to hopeful stories.
That's a good point. I mean, just let them hear some other things. And they might need to see it before they actually can start feeling it and frankly believing it themselves.
So true.
So I think if we think of stories that show characters overcoming obstacles or adversity, that's a great thing. I mean, maybe there's movies that have a theme of resilience. There's just so much out there to choose from.
Yeah.
But I think you just have to choose wisely for the children in your life so that they can actually see and relate to someone else before then maybe they can really start to identify it for themselves.
Yeah. And maybe this is where we should add that hope takes practice.
Yeah.
Some people maybe naturally have a positive outlook in life, and, for those people, hope might come easily to them.
Right. But for others, and I think we definitely see this in our cases with our some of our children and certainly the teens who have had maybe years of not so positive experiences, hope is something that really probably needs to be learned and taught to them a little bit.
For sure. And so that's why it takes practice.
Yes. So now I'm really curious because I'm still thinking about Taylor's case. So did she learn hope?
Yeah. I'm happy to say that Taylor and her father are both practicing hope.
Nice.
Now, Taylor's CASA advocate began to learn that her father was battling mental illness and was unaware of the services that were available to him, not just for his own well-being, but for his entire family.
Which is understandable. It's all very overwhelming. And I think when you think about his situation, working multiple jobs, how are you also then having the time to research and connect with resources?
Right. It's just not realistic.
Right.
But luckily, Taylor's advocate helped her father set small steps to take each week on a path towards treatment and just stability for their family, all the while helping Taylor take steps towards doing better in school. And so with a few wins under her belt, Taylor started to be able to look further ahead, a little further, a little further, with hope. And so she set more and more goals for herself.
I love that. I mean, I am a positive person, so this makes me happy. And now that we're talking about this, I do remember this case, and I almost wish we had more time to go into the details because really so much changed for Taylor and her father, and the transformation was really actually amazing.
It was, and it was 100% rooted in hope.
Yes, and I remember that the judge actually stepped down from the bench to come shake Taylor and her father's hands, just telling them how proud she was of them and what they had accomplished.
Yeah, and that's such a very positive moment to deposit in that hope bank of theirs.
That is special. So listener, now is the time that we leave you, as we often do, with a call to action so that you can help teach the children in your life about hope.
Yep. And for this call to action, you may want to grab a glue stick because we're going to get crafty.
Ooh. So how about sit down with the children in your life and make a vision board for 2025?
Yeah.
Help them brainstorm their hopes and dreams, identify goals with them, small or big.
Yeah. And then create a visual manifestation of those hopes in a vision board. It will be a great encouragement throughout the year.
Yeah. Put it up in their room, and it can be a reminder of the bright future that we are all working towards.
Thank you for listening to Vigilant Voices, Henrico Casa's podcast. We have a vision for all children to live in safe, healthy homes. You can help us make that happen. Tell a friend about our podcast and find us on social media.
I believe in the better days.